Hello everyone. Today we're going to be looking at our GRRR on change. So this is our theme for today, change. And we can see that it's defined as the following. Change means basic alterations in things, events, and ideas. Throughout global history, major changes have had significant and lasting impacts on human development. So significant and lasting impacts. So we're talking about things in this homework that have caused great change. So our first direction we know is to label the 7 continents and 5 oceans. So we've got North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Africa, Oceania, and Antarctica for our continents. And then for our oceans, we have the Arctic Ocean way up north and the Southern Ocean way down south. And then the Indian, the Pacific on both sides of our map, and the Atlantic. We always want to have those things in mind, just as a reference, okay? So we're going to read each bullet out loud and draw an arrow to the area where each change occurred. So our first bullet says, the Neolithic Revolution is a result of warmer weather which allowed plants to grow and agriculture to develop. You want to keep in mind that agriculture is another word for farming. Agriculture allowed for the development of permanent settlements and an abundant food supply, leading to the growth of cities. So these are the effects of farming, which is what agriculture means. So we know that the Neolithic Revolution, the start of farming happened in lots of different areas around the world, and also primarily happened, those civilizations grew up mostly around river valleys, right? So we can take a look at Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus River Valley. We can look at China. This happened in Mexico, although not along a river, but along something called cenotes. Our next change is the Crusades. The Crusades were a series of religious wars fought between Christians and Muslims over the Holy Land, or Palestine. The Crusades caused feudalism to weaken and trade to increase. So again, these are the effects. Weakens the feudal system, increases trade. Previous to the Crusades, most people in Western Europe were living on manors, and after the Crusades, they stopped. The Crusades occurred, though, around the Holy Land, which is here. The bubonic plague spread along trade routes on merchant ships. The plague led to the growth of powerful nations, kings, as well as economic decline throughout the world. So spread along trade routes. And the trade routes we're looking at there are the Silk Roads and the Mediterranean Sea. So those are the primary areas that we're looking at, okay? It also mostly affected Europe, so we want to go in this direction. And our last change is Confucianism. Confucianism taught people to accept their place in society. The beliefs are based on the 5 relationships and respect for your elders. Respect for your elders is known as filial piety. So that's the fancy word for respect for your elders, filial piety. Confucianism influenced the Han Dynasty through the implementation of the civil service system and establishing proper behavior for all of society. It was also used under the Tang and Sung dynasties. So we're looking at China here. So we want to draw an arrow up to China. So your map might end up looking a little bit messy. Mine certainly is. So just be careful with that, because you do want to be able to use it to study. Okay, I'm going to move forward here. If you need more time with this section, please pause. I'm going to move on to the multiple choice. First, I'm going to calibrate my pen, so you'll have to excuse me. Okay, so we're taking a look at the multiple choice. It says annotate each multiple choice question then circle the correct answer. So we're going to take a look at these. So first we have here, what is the best title for this diagram? So we have nomads, hunters and gatherers, simple tools and weapons, and then the arrow, this arrow implies the change, right? There was a change to farmers, domesticated animals, and the establishment of villages. So what we have here is the beginning of agriculture. If you look up to earlier in your GRRR, you'll notice that agriculture is part of the Neolithic Revolution, which is what we're looking for in our answer. All right. Which term is most closely related to these three actions? Our three actions here are showing respect for parents, maintaining family honor, and honoring all elders. These are ideas associated with Confucianism, and I did define this word up here above in respect for your elders. So go back up and look at your notes, or check the earlier video to get the answer to that question. All right, number 3, many achievements of Islamic civilization reached European society by way of the. So what we're looking for are achievements, so new technology and ideas of Islamic civilization. So we're talking about like the Abbasid Golden Age under the Muslims, and they went to Europe, so we're talking about trade. So we're looking for something that would have motivated more trade. Crusades and Eastern Mediterranean trading networks, merchant guilds in the Industrial Revolution, Middle Passage in the Columbian Exchange, conquest of the Germanic tribes, and trade along the Silk Road. This you don't study until 10th grade. And then the conquest of the Germanic tribes actually reduced trade in Western Europe. So you've got two choices now. I would suggest you go back and look over the information about the Crusades to see if that fits. And finally, number 4, the bubonic plague affected economic development in medieval times by encouraging the introduction of new types of crops, causing production to decline and prices to rise, sparking the ideas of socialism and reform, or destroying the guild system. So you want to pay extra close attention to the verbs here. So production to decline, prices to rise, sparking the ideas means to start them, destroying means to get rid of something, encouraging means to make more of it happen. So you want to pay attention to those. Remember that the bubonic plague caused a lot of death. So that meant there were less workers, right? There were fewer people to do the work. So that should lead you to your answer. Again, if you need more time with the multiple choice, please pause the video, go back and rewatch it if you'd like. I'm going to move on to the next section with the document. Okay. It says, the Neolithic Revolution also changed the way people live. We know this was the start of farming. Changed the way people lived. In place of scattered hunting communities, the farmers lived in villages. So in place of also means instead. So instead of. So they did not. They did not live in these hunting communities. Instead, the farmers lived in villages. Near groups of villages, small towns grew up, and later cities too. Okay, so towns and cities. Thus, the Neolithic Revolution made civilization itself possible. Wow, it's a big, big deal. Within the villages, towns, and cities, it was possible for people to specialize in the sort of work they could do best. So specialize, if you remember specialization, people had many different kinds of jobs. Many stopped producing food at all, making instead tools and other goods that farmers needed, and for which they gave them food in exchange. This is a result of the surplus that comes from farming. Okay? Farming created a surplus of food. Because of that, the farmers grew more than they needed personally, so they would trade it for people who specialized in other things. This process of exchange led to trade and traders, and the growth of trade made it possible for people to specialize even more. We know another word for traders, which is merchants. All right, so the question we're trying to answer is based on this document, which means it has to come from the document, not outside information yet. State one impact of the Neolithic Revolution on the way people lived. Impact is another word for effect. So name one effect of the Neolithic Revolution on the way people lived. We annotated a bunch, and the topic sentence here tells us that's what we're going to find. The Neolithic Revolution changed the way people lived. So we know they're going to support that later on. The author does that. And so really you've got lots of options there for a correct answer. Our next directions are to write down two pieces of outside information. So what we're looking for with outside information are facts, details, ideas that are connected to the source but are not directly stated in it. Okay? So for example, the Neolithic Revolution made civilization itself possible. So one of the things we can do for outside info is name specific examples of those civilizations. So your first example is Mesopotamia. Earlier, we looked at other places, including the Indus River Valley, China, and Egypt, where that civilization occurred. So you could give some details about one of those. We also, in here, many stopped producing food at all, making instead tools and other goods that farmers needed. So what you could do is give examples of technologies that were developed. So for example, something like the plow was developed in Mesopotamia. That made it easier for farmers to do their work. So that's another way you can go with your outside information. Okay, you want to give information that's going to make the document more specific. Something like surplus, explaining how surplus leads to job specialization. Using that word could also count as outside information. If you need some more time with your outside info, please go ahead and pause the video. I'm going to move along to the last part of the assignment, which is, in fact, to connect. So how does the topic of this source above, connect to what you are currently learning in class? So this source above is talking about the Neolithic Revolution. And we know that the Neolithic Revolution was a big change, and that big change led to a surplus of food that then led to job specialization that then led to civilization. So we also know that job specialization leads to new technology. So if you're in a unit where you're studying specific new technologies, okay, you can name one of those technologies, okay? I need a few minutes. All right, the other thing that you can do, so you can connect it by saying that the Neolithic Revolution led to a surplus to specialization to new technology, and give an example of that technology. Okay. You could also talk about trade. So we know that that surplus, it mentions merchants and the growth of trade. So if you're learning in class about a place that does a lot of trading, you can draw the connection there. What you need to make sure you do for this answer, please, is that you need to make sure you have info from the document and from class. Okay, you need both in order to show a connection. You can't just mention something about class. You have to explain how it connects in order to get full credit. Okay, at this point, we've covered all the different parts of the GRRR. If you missed something, please go back and replay the video in that area. Thank you very much.